From characters who haven't even figured out how to count to those who can count every single second perfectly for 4,000 years straight, some anime characters just completely redefine what it means to be intelligent. And so today we're talking about the smartest characters in all of anime, but first, the dumbest. Starting with My Hero Academia's Denki Kaminari, who sure picked the short straw when it came to getting his very personal quirk. Despite being able to unleash truly devastating discharges of electricity, this surge also happens to somewhat short-circuit his own brain, leaving him in a completely dumbfounded and unresponsive state for a full hour, which leads to his post-power state being the dumbest character in all of anime. Inosuke from Demon Slayer also has plenty of brute strength, but one thing that he does lack for sure is the benefit of a formal education. So until Boris start founding a public school system, him and all the other kids fending for themselves in the mountains are just gonna go lack a whole lot of knowledge about how things actually work in the world. I also hesitated to put a literal child at the bottom of this list, so instead I will put her third. Now Anya did barely manage to scrape by the Eden Academy's entry exam, but I have to give her some credit for making it into such a prestigious school, even though she's technically not even old enough to enroll and lied about her age. Nonetheless though, these test scores don't lie. Even with psychic mind-reading powers, Anya's academic progress is kind of abysmal. She really needs to spend less time watching TV and more time hitting the books, preferably without falling asleep. However, this next terrible student doesn't have the excuse of being an elementary schooler. You see, Mash Burndat from Mashal, Magic and Muscles is all brawn and absolutely zero brains. As in, this man doesn't know how to open a door without tearing it straight out of the wall. Like, he doesn't even know how to count. And in general, one thing that many of the biggest shonen protagonists ever have in common is that they are pretty dumb. Lovably dumb, that is, because even though their hearts are really pure, their brains are just not that very active outside of fighting. Like, say, Luffy from One Piece is many things, and smart isn't really one of them. Like, don't get me wrong, he has great creative instincts for battle and very high emotional intelligence, but I'm not here to talk about empathy and understanding. I'm here to talk about big-time brainiacs. And God forbid anyone tries to explain even the simplest plan to Luffy, it's gonna go in one ear and then probably also out the very same ear immediately. Any kind of phenomenon that he doesn't understand, which is just about all of them, is just instantly explained away as a mystery something, an explanation which, by the way, totally satisfies Luffy's tiny brain. Also, funnily enough, he is the only character on this list who has a canonical power-up that makes him dumber, because he used his Gomu Gomu no Baka technique against Enel and stopped thinking about his entire move so that he could try to get past Enel's insane observation haki, which was able to predict his moves. And then, very much like Luffy, Goku also leaves a lot to be desired in the intelligence department as well. If it's not fighting, he doesn't really care about it, though we do have to give him credit for his genius fighting skills. I would kind of hate to see Goku taking on, say, a math test. Now, thankfully, Chi-Chi was around to ensure that Gohan would get a proper education, at least after his rough and tumble camping trip with his stepdad Piccolo. Now, Naruto, on the other hand, I think kind of gets a bad rap compared to his other shonen counterparts. I mean, sure, in the beginning chapters of Naruto, he's struggling at the Ninja Academy, but he was also basically a delinquent orphan kid with no real guardians that look over him. He was just a child who liked to goof off and play pranks which were actually pretty clever in some cases. And once Naruto actually grew up, he really came into his own, becoming a great leader and even a teacher. And he's also smart enough to realize that he needs to surround himself with advisors such as the actual smartest character Naruto. More about him in just a little bit. Really, Kid Naruto might have seemed dumb at the beginning, but really he was just a kid being a kid. He can be headstrong and make bad decisions at times, but hey, isn't that pretty much everybody? Which means that now that we've talked about really dumb characters and some regular characters, now it's time to get to characters who are actually smart, with some characters who are some real star students in their anime. Starting with Norman and Ray from Promised Neverland, who are a couple of little kids as well, but they're the highest scoring students in the orphanage, and it's also thanks to their intellect and long-term planning that the main characters are able to escape from the prison of the adults in the first place. And my next pair of straight A students comes from Kaguya-sama Love is War. Kaguya and Miyuki are the vice president and president of their student council respectively, and also the school's top students. And when they're not busy playing complex love games or participating in extracurriculars, they're hitting the books and making those grades. Karma Akabane is one of Assassination Classroom's most intelligent characters, other than a certain teacher that we'll get to later as well. Now, to be honest, Karma is violent and sadistic, which surely helps him with the art of assassination. However, surprisingly, he also gets some really high grades basically without even really trying. He kind of puts minimal efforts into academics, but still performs extremely well, a real credit to his intellect. Ami Mizuno, more commonly known as Sailor Mercury, is also the smartest of all the Sailor Scouts. In fact, whenever she transforms into her Sailor Scout form, she even says she fights for love and intelligence, since each scout kind of represents a certain personality trait along with their elements. Now, unsurprisingly, Sailor Mercury also performs the best in school out of her peers, and when she's not manipulating water and ice, she's pretty handy with a computer actually. Tenya Ida is the Class 1A president in My Hero Academia. In addition to being super fast, he's also super studious, which you can kind of see, I guess. His straight-laced persona lends itself really well to earning access grades in his classes too, but he's far from the smartest character in Class 1A, it turns out. Because that distinction would go to Momo Yaoyorozu, who is not just a great student, she's a literal genius, our first on this list actually. Momo's quirk, Creation, lets her transform the molecular structure of her fat cells to create any non-living thing. But there's a catch. She has to perfectly understand the chemical makeup of whatever she's trying to create in order to conjure it correctly. Meaning that without having an absolute genius intellect, her quirk would probably be almost barely usable, but luckily she's got the brains to use it in really cunning and clever ways to gain the upper hand in many battles. But the distinction of anime's most elite student would probably have to go to none other than Kiyotaka Ayano Koji from Classroom of the Elites. Now, surprisingly, he doesn't really get great scores on tests, but that's only because he's gaming the system and manipulates all of his entrance exam scores to get placed in a lower class on purpose. He's just extremely perceptive and is a skilled negotiator, but despite having an unparalleled intellect, he prefers to hide his power level and not overachieve on purpose. But now, getting out of the classroom and into some real-world experience, let's talk about the founder of the Fairy Tail Guild, Mavis Vermilion. In addition to being a very skilled user of illusion magic, she's known by her alias of the Fairy Tactician. When it comes to large-scale battles, she's able to run through hundreds of battle scenarios in her mind and make decisive choices about the best course of action. And actually, the very same thing is also true for yet another excellent strategist, Armin from Attack on Titan. Even though Armin was a relatively young member of the Scouts, the higher-ups regularly had strong faith in his strategic mind, and many times his cleverness saved the Scouts from certain disaster at the hands and mouths of the Titans. But of course, strategy doesn't always play out on the field of battle. Sometimes a fierce battle of wits can also just take place over a board game, such as the case in the anime No Game No Life, where step-sibling protagonists Soda and Shiro are isekai'd into a world of games where they must depend on their keen intellect and mastery of game theory in order to survive. Kuriso Makise from Steins Gate is yet another genius student, so much so that she became a university graduate at 17 years old. She's an absolute brilliant neuroscientist and a member of the Future Gadget Lab, where she and some others unlock the technological means of changing the past. That sounds pretty smart to me. And from one young genius here, we go with another one, Edward Elric. With Edward Elric's bold and brash personality, it's kind of easy to forget that he's a literal genius child prodigy. In Fullmetal Alchemist, the alchemy power system is a real science. It's not as simple as just drawing some special symbols and then transmuting materials. To perform alchemy, especially at the level of Elric's, you need a really deep, comprehensive understanding of physics and chemistry, being able to comprehend the molecular structure of a material, and knowing how potential and kinetic energy will operate on it. Not for no reason does Edward Elric become the youngest state alchemist in the history of Amestris, kind of like one of those kids you hear about who obtain Ivy League PhDs when they're still in their teenage years. And honestly, his brother Alphonse and childhood friend slash love interest Winry Rockabelle aren't too far behind him either, with El having alchemy skills rivaling his brother's, and Winry having engineering skills as an automail technician that match their alchemy experience as well. But now, on my thorough investigation of the smartest characters in anime, maybe it's now time to talk about some literal detectives. And first off, we have a personal all-time favorite anime character of mine, Osamu Dazai from Bungo Stray Dogs. Check that anime out if you haven't seen seen it. Now, he's a master detective as well as a former mafia leader, as well as a really cunning communicator and negotiator. Then probably the most famous anime detective of all, except possibly one other that we'll talk about soon, is Shinichi Kudo, the genius teenage detective. However, after his body is transformed into that of a literal child by a mysterious organization, he now goes by Conan Edogawa, the namesake of Detective Conan and /or Case Closed, if you're watching the English translation. Now, Conan, who named himself actually after Sherlock Holmes author Arthur Conan Doyle, has a ton of high intellect skills to act as one of the world's greatest detectives. He has a keen sense of observation, being able to notice minor details that are overlooked by many other people. He deeply understands criminal psychology and many other subjects such as literature, computers, music, and even bomb diffusion, I guess? You know, like the average teenager does. And hey, with over 1,000 chapters of the manga, Conan's had a lot of time to learn all types of skills, so what's your excuse again, Luffy? Now, of course, Conan is not the only master detective in anime. He's just the best dressed one, because there is also L from Death Note. And let me tell you, what this guy lacks in fashion sense, posture, and general upkeep, he very much makes up for in big brain mystery solving. In the universe of this show, he's known as the world's greatest detective and uses his immense power of deduction and reasoning to try to track down the supernatural serial killer Kira, whose true identity, of course, Light Yagami, is also on this list as well. You see, L finds his intellectual match in Light Yagami as they engage in an intense battle of cat and mouse, pretty much. That's right, they're kind of like the Tom and Jerry of anime. Light's naturally gifted intelligence and constant praise unfortunately leads to him using his academic gift for evil, or for justice in his own mind, I guess. Not only did he think of a multitude of strategies to try to make the world a better place using the power of the Death Note, he also used the power of his own mind to take a potato chip and eat it. Ooh. Next up, Agent Twilight, or Tasogare, is the fictional country of Westalia's greatest spy. Now, saying that Spy Family's #1 dad is a genius is kind of an understatement. He has a near photographic memory and was once able to memorize the names of over 200 penguins simply by skimming a list at the zoo. Like, try doing that, please, and remembering even one. He's a pretty keen observer of even the smallest details in a given situation, and he can analyze a complex situation and react in a fraction of a second. He's basically able to master any new skill and has expert level knowledge on all kinds of intellectual topics, such as is necessary to be able to camouflage himself under the guise of other identities while he's busy, well, spying. But while he uses his powers for good, the next genius on the list is a real monster. Johann Liebert is one of anime's all-time most terrifying villains. He doesn't use deadly superpowers or lasers to accomplish evil though. Instead, what makes this villain perhaps more psychologically terrifying than any other is that he accomplishes his goals by using nothing but his charisma and his intellect. Using his insane intelligence, he psychologically dominates other people. By using his influence, he almost single-handedly crashes the global economy and power structure, and only doesn't because he decides to change his goal. He's able to manipulate practically anyone into doing anything. If you haven't, just please watch Monster, it's so good. Lelouch is yet another genius who uses his gifts for high-minded social engineering. Though he does have the benefit of the geese, a superpower that allows him to give him the ability to give any person a command that they are helpless to obey. But nonetheless, I think that Lelouch's true gift that makes him so threatening is his intelligence and his cunningness. And so it's not just his power, but also how he strategically employs it that sees him reshaping the world as he pleases. And you know that he must be a real genius because he's introduced by doing the cliche genius villain activity, playing chess at a master level. But of course, he's not the only anime character who loves a good game of strategy. Shikamaru Nara is one of the few anime characters on this list who actually has a canonical IQ. You see, despite Shikamaru barely ever trying in his schoolwork and receiving average marks, his teacher Asuma had the impression that he was way smarter than he let on. And so by disguising intellectual tests as games of strategy like shogi, he determined that Shikamaru had an IQ of over 200. Now for reference, this beats out the real world IQ of longtime world chess champion Garry Kasparov, whose IQ was measured at 194. In fact, Shikamaru is currently known as the smartest person in the Hidden Leaf Village. He's a master strategist, able to formulate over 100 strategies in an instant and immediately choose the optimal path towards victory. And now I know I already talked about his student Karma, but next on the list is Koro-sensei, the teacher from Assassination Classroom. Now Koro-sensei has a long list of powers that go along with being a mysterious alien being, but one of them is his insanely high-powered intellect. He has an eidetic memory, which is the technical term, I guess, for photographic memory. He's hypercognitive, which means his brain operates several times faster than normal. He's an insanely talented inventor, chemist, and programmer, and above it all, he still wants to share his knowledge with his students by being a great teacher. You know, before he ultimately might destroy the world anyways. But next up, starting off the mad scientist type of group, we have three evil geniuses of the One Piece world: Vin Smoke Judge, Caesar Clown, and Queen. Now these three scientists once worked under Dr. Vegapunk as member of MADS, the Laboratory for Peace. Spoiler alert, the peace part didn't work out too great for any of them though. Now it turns out that each of these three scientists have specific areas of expertise in which they do their best work. Judge here is an expert on cloning, using the technology to create his Germa 66 army, and in addition to that, he also augmented his own children and designed advanced weaponry like the Germa raid suits. Caesar developed chemical weapons of mass destruction, as well as the sad compound molecule that is used to create artificial devil fruits. And Queen here is known as Queen the Plague because, well, you guessed it, he loves creating man-made viruses as well as enhancing his own body with powerful cybernetics. And now this next scientist here is less mad in an evil way, but he's still a scientist through and through. Senku Ishigami from Dr. Stone literally has all the knowledge necessary to rebuild civilization from scratch. He has a straight-up encyclopedic knowledge of disciplines like chemistry, physics, geology, biology, mathematics, and many, many more. He has an excellent memory and proficiency in multiple languages, and not only that, he also has an insane degree of mental strength because while petrified with the rest of the world, he maintained his consciousness and counted time correctly for 4,000 years straight. Like, don't get me wrong, I think most people would completely lose their mind, but Senku here just remained sharp as a tack. Then Bulma Briefs is also firmly on the side of good guys, but it doesn't mean she can't give off some serious mad scientist vibes at times as well. I mean, I definitely wouldn't want to get on her bad side. And instead of using the Dragon Balls to wish for something like, I don't know, world peace maybe, she just wants to look younger or get a boyfriend, like, which when you think about it, is kind of evil, like, technically. And as the heir to the Capsule Corporation and one of the world's top scientists, she has a mastery of all things technological. She's able to reverse engineer advanced alien technology with ease. She and her father, I guess, who originally invented all the technology, has a deep understanding of the capsule technology, which functions like a Pokeball in order to totally break the laws of physics by shrinking massive objects into tiny capsules. And then she somehow also managed to invent the Dragon Radar, so without her, Dragon Ball is really barely possible to begin with, I guess. And now back to the truly evil geniuses, we have to give it up to the Snake Man himself, Orochimaru. Even though I'd argue that Shikamaru defeats him in raw intellectual prowess and IQ, Orochimaru has a quality that lets his knowledge surpass that of other Naruto characters: pure ambition. You see, Orochimaru kind of has this insatiable thirst to gain all the knowledge the world has to offer, including trying to master every jutsu and to acquire immortality. So, you know, no biggie. In order to advance his own goals, there's really no ethical boundary that he's not willing to break in his pursuit of science. And he's kind of willing to sacrifice as many human test subjects as it will take to get there. Much like Kurotsuchi Mayuri from Bleach, the head of the Soul Society's research division and one of the Soul Reaper captains. Wait, this is a good guy? Are we actually sure about that? Yeah? Okay, well for now I guess I'll just brush aside all of his human test subjects and instead talk about his skill as an inventor. Captain Kurozuchi has developed all manner of chemical weapons, and not just poisons, but ones that completely mess with his opponent's perception of space and time. He's also a real master of recalibrating and altering Sanpakdo, the swords wielded by the Soul Reaper, so that he can continue to adapt and develop his own abilities as well. And that's kind of just scratching the surface with this guy. I mean, he reveals a a wild new invention practically every time he's on screen. Not to mention, his makeup game is pretty much on point as well. Though he's of course not the only character in Bleach who regularly gets makeovers. I also have to mention one of the series' main protagonists, Sosuke Aizen. Yeah, that guy. Like, this man was like the leading lady in a romantic comedy, taking off her glasses and turning out to be beautiful, except when he took off the glasses, he just kind of turned out to be evil and beautiful and a dick. Anyways, he's pretty smart too, I guess. Like, if I needed to summarize it, this man has plans, on top of plans, inside of plans. Stealing a special magical item, he planned that. Betraying the entire Soul Society, planned that too. You watching this video? Yeah, he planned that from the very beginning, it turns out. But not only is he a great long-term strategist and cunning manipulator, Aizen is also a scientist in his own right as well, performing wicked experiments in order to break the boundaries between Soul Reaper and Hollow and advance his own unbelievable power even further. It turns out that even he is not even the smartest character in all of Bleach, but we'll get to that later. But for the next batch of characters, we're not just talking about characters who happen to be smart, we're talking about the galaxy brain kind of characters whose powers are to be smart. They don't just like reach the peak of human intelligence or science and then have other superpowers on top of that. They are super smart, like as their superpower in the most literal sense. Starting things off with Saiki Kisuo, whose psychic abilities are so powerful he needs to wear limiters at all times. But aside from his powers, he's also a real super genius in his very own right. At only 1 month old, he was already walking, talking, and of course using his powers. And it does seem to run in the family as well, because his brother Kusuke is also a genius inventor. Then there is Principal Nezu from My Hero Academia, whose quirk, high specs, makes him like crazy good at math, I guess. Nezu is kind of a rare case of an animal manifesting a quirk as well, and this intelligent-based power makes it so he can live in human society despite not being human. His powers don't really get displayed that often, but during the first term final exam, Mina and Kaminari utterly failed when they were matched up against Nezu. Then again, it just doesn't really seem fair to put Kaminari, again, probably the dumbest character in anime in that state, up against one of the very smartest. By operating some really heavy machinery, Nezu breaks a few structures on the testing ground, setting off a hugely complex chain reaction that kind of acts like a Rube Goldberg machine of mass destruction, I guess. He's easily able to predict the students' moves and systematically blocks all of their escape routes. But now I'm just kind of getting antsy waiting for the next character, so let's talk about Meruem, the king of the Chimera Ants from Hunter x Hunter. Now Meruem basically has it all. Super strength, super speed, consuming the powers of others, and even altering his own physical body. But one of his premier abilities is actually his super intelligence, far exceeding that of regular humans. Despite only being alive in the story for like a month, like Meruem is actually 40 days old, he easily crushed various masters of strategy games after only a few rounds of play. Really, the only exception was with the game Gungi, which he only lost because of Nen interference. His intellect is truly a step beyond what any human could be capable of, and I can only imagine how much he would have learned if he was alive for, I don't know, like 2 months. But Meruem isn't the only character whose intelligence is based on evolving beyond human capabilities. Kars, the final villain of JoJo Bizarre's Adventure Part 2, is the leader of the ancient Pillarmen and the inventor of the stone mask that actually made Dio into a vampire and set all of JoJo's into action to begin with. Now in the climatic final battle against Joseph Joestar, he transforms into the ultimate life form, containing the DNA of every life form on Earth and allowing him to manipulate his own biology at will. Now this form is stated to have an IQ of 400, far exceeding any actual recorded IQ in the real world. And so to actually exceed Kars' intelligence, we'll have to ascend to the spiritual plane for one more Bleach character, because Kisuke Urahara is the smartest character in the series, who's even acknowledged by Aizen, one of the most vain and conceited characters to ever exist, as being smarter than him. Kurotsuchi may be the current head of the research division, but Urahara founded it. Turns out that he's invented a ton of useful technologies for Seoul society, such as the Hogyoko that Aizen used to increase his power and the artificial bodies called Giga. In fact, his intelligence is so overwhelming that he was named as one of the Seoul society's 5 special war powers, who Yawak actually considered a threat himself. Of course, even his intellect is still minuscule compared to the official highest anime IQ of all time. I mean, Carsheel already smashed the actual world record with 400, but our next character has an official IQ of 530,000. At least that's what Aoi Todo from Jujutsu Kaisen claims himself. Apparently, he's not only boogie woogie, but brainy wainy as well. But for real, smartest character in all of anime in the end is gonna be none other than Dr. Vegapunk from One Piece. Using the power of a literal brain devil fruit, he attains a truly insane level of knowledge and wisdom. His galaxy brain got so big that it wouldn't even fit inside his physical head anymore, and he had to remove it and then keep it within a giant building called the Punk Records that he then accesses remotely. In fact, this man is so intelligent that his knowledge couldn't even be contained in a single body. Instead, his scientific research is beamed into 6 different bodies called the satellites that all house different parts of his personality so that he can be even more productive as a scientist. He's a prolific genius who's invented the most groundbreaking technologies like creating artificial devil fruits, feeding devil fruits to inanimate objects, creating superpowered clones called the Seraphim, making holograms, island-level climate control, and superpowered energy sources like the Mother Flame, and he has even uncovered many of the secrets of the Lost Void Century in One Piece. Meaning that this apple-headed Albert Einstein lookalike is truly on a whole different level intelligence-wise. Now, you may be rightfully asking yourself, well, Dr. Vegapunk may be able to think fast, but can he also run fast? Yeah, well, he might get the high score in the math test, but what about the 100-meter dash? Now, I think we're gonna need a whole different set of anime characters for that, so you can also check my list of fastest anime characters in this video right here. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video shot from this remote location today, then please like, share, subscribe. It's annoying to ask, but it really helps the channel. And hopefully we'll see you in the next one.